All right, we have returned. Time travel to return shortly. But Jim, let's play some Guess the Program.
All righty.
If that's okay with you.
That's perfectly fine with me there, fella.
And of course, this is where I go through programs in my collection. Some that I've had for a while, some that I've just obtained. But I'm getting ready to file them away, so I have them here. We go through them. Jim guesses the location, the date, the bell time.
Oh, come on now.
And everything else. But, all right, let's get going here. I got an interesting card. I was a little surprised looking at the main event here. The opening contest, Big Moose Cholak versus Fred Atkins.
Ooh.
For a title I will not name, the champion Johnny Case versus Johnny Gilbert. A ladies tag team match, Shirley Strimple and Corinne Cordero versus Betty Clark and Babe Bittner. I can honestly say I don't know any of those four women.
Shirley Strimple I have heard of. I've heard of Strimple. And not Shirley Temple, by the way. Shirley Strimple.
And not George Temple. But Dick Steinborn versus the Mighty Atlas. A tag match, Sweet Daddy Siki and Seaman Art Thomas versus the Fabulous Kangaroos, who are listed as World Tag Team Champions. And the main event, for the World's Heavyweight Championship, Pat O'Connor versus the Crusher.
Oh. Well, boy howdy. At first, I was thinking, when I heard Fred Atkins, immediately I was like, what the fuck is Moose Cholak doing in Toronto? Because Moose Cholak, one thinks of the Midwest, Chicago, Indianapolis, but Fred Atkins was a wrestler and later a manager early on in the Northeast and in Toronto. But Johnny Case and Johnny Gilbert bring it back to Chicago. The girls' tag is immaterial to this. Steinborn and the Mighty Atlas. Mighty Atlas was Morris Shapiro, and he was a big deal in the Midwest and in Chicago. Dick Steinborn, because of the time era that this would be, he'd probably been in the business 6, 7, 8 years at this point, was the son of Milo Steinborn, the famous strongman from the 30s and 40s, who was a promoter for Eddie Graham in Florida for years and years. And Dick Steinborn was also a noted photographer. Did you know that, Brian? Wrestling photographer. Well, he liked to take pictures, but he did some wrestling photography.
No, I did know that. I believe Scott Teal has those, and it may be because Dick Steinborn ended up owing him money like he owed a lot of people money. I believe he was also known as a bit of a locker room, what's the word I'm looking for?
Light-fingered Louie.
He didn't mind touching other people's stuff and just leaving the building with it.
He would touch their junk. And Sweet Daddy Siki and Seaman Art Thomas, before he became Sailor Art Thomas. Seaman didn't have as many connotations back in that time period. Were a popular African-American tag team about that time in the Chicago area. And the Kangaroos, they were the World Tag Team Champions. They wrestled all over. The World Heavyweight title with Pat O'Connor and the Crusher. This is what, and you said it's odd to you. That would almost take you away from Chicago because O'Connor was not noted. It wasn't until they had a bunch of NWA title matches there until Rogers won the belt in Chicago. Of course, that's where Rogers beat O'Connor in 1961. So we're in Chicago and it's 1960. Are you talking to me on mute?
I'm on mute and it's 2025. The program, the International Amphitheater, Halsted Street, Chicago, May 26, 1961.
No! Oh!
See, the O'Connor being champion thing, if you assume that, again, you could have assumed it was the Crusher as the champion somewhere else.
Well, but no.
But you would only have a short window, and that was the window.
So it was right before they were giving O'Connor a win over Crusher in Chicago to set up the match with Rogers, is what you're saying to me.
I presume so. Let me see. I just put it down, but no, the results are not marked in this one. Not marked. There's a big cut in the cover, though, but all right. Jim, the next program here. The first match, one fall, 15-minute time limit. Oscar Salazar, 210 out of Barcelona, Spain, versus Texas Tiger Romo, 204, El Paso, Texas.
Okay, immediately, you stop there. I can name this song in 2 notes. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
A special event, tag team match, one fall to a finish. Bob Bomber Hamby, 205 out of Charlotte, and Mickey Sharp, 206, the blonde bombshell out of Houston, versus Alejandro Cruz, 200 pounds, the human rocket out of Mexico City, and Ray Crosby, 209 out of Albuquerque.
Ray Crosby? I didn't know Bing's brother got into business.
The first main event, 2 out of 3 falls or 60-minute time limit. Paul de Gaulle, 213 out of Paris, France, the fancy Frenchman, claimant of the International Junior Heavyweight Championship, versus Gory Guerrero, 210,
Okay.
World Light Heavyweight Champion.
So finally, somebody I've heard of.
The second main event, 2 out of 3 falls, 60-minute time limit. The Mummy, 211, from somewhere in South America, weirdest wrestler in the world, versus Juan Garcia, 210, Albuquerque, New Mexico, popular wrestler. And finally, triple main event, winner take all, loser leaves town rematch. 2 out of 3 falls or 60-minute time limit. Andre Drapp, 200 pounds, Mr. France, Paris, unsatisfied on last week's decision, issued challenge, versus the Mad Mongol, 227 pounds, claw hold expert, seldom lost rematch.
That's it, huh?
That's it.
Boy, howdy. First match, obviously never heard of. I've heard of the name Bob Hamby. In that second match, obviously Gory Guerrero, the father of Chavo and Hector and Eddie and Mondo, grandfather of Chavo Jr., and Paul de Gaulle, the Mummy in this incarnation. I'm not sure, but the most famous mummy was Benji Ramirez. And with Andre Drapp, who again, I've heard the name, the Mongol could have been anybody. This has got to be either West Texas or New Mexico, especially with some of the hometowns. Gory Guerrero may very well have had a hand in promoting the fucking thing. But if this was Ramirez was the Mummy, it would have been 1970, 71, 72, that time period. If not, I still maintain that it's West Texas, El Paso, or New Mexico. And with Andre Drapp in the main event, it seems like it would be older, back in the 60s. I don't know, 1970, Albuquerque, New Mexico.
The date? February 26, 1963.
No!
The program, 15 cents. El Paso Wrestling Program. And this is a special one celebrating our first birthday Tonight marks the first anniversary of International Wrestling Enterprises, bringing to the people of El Paso the wonderful sport of wrestling. Thank you, fans, for making it possible.
That may have even been before Gory had part of the promotion, possibly. But if that's 1963, which, like I said, with Andre Drapp, I thought it would. Is that Benji Ramirez, the mummy, or is it just a regular old outlaw mummy, or can you tell from the picture?
I can't tell, but I'll double check against other things afterwards. 4 beautiful girls have been signed to appear here in El Paso next week. The promoter...
Oh boy, and maybe we can talk them into wrestling.
The promoter, Dr. Gardia, received a good number of letters of girl wrestlers asking for a chance to meet the peppery Miss Olga Martinez. Anyway, Dr. Gardia has signed up the following girl wrestlers: Ann Casey, Olga Martinez, Brenda Scott, Judy Grable. We still don't know if the promoter is going to book them in a singles match or tag team match. And there it is. All right, let's get our next program.
I saw Ann Casey wrestle live in 1975. She had her leopard print one-piece bathing suit on and the big black hair and a whole 9 yards.
All right, this one here. Interesting program. The opening bout, Irish Danny McShane versus Jackie Nichols. As it says here, a colored girls tag team match. Lulu Mae Provo and Babs Wingo versus Marva Scott and Kathleen Wimbley. An Australian tag team match. Dr. Jerry Graham and Professor Roy Shire versus Wilbur Snyder and Chief Bigheart. Tarzan Killer Kowalski versus Zaya Nandor out of Budapest, Hungary.
How do you spell that first one?
C-Z-A-Y-A.
That's right.
N-A-N-D-O-R.
Was he any relation to, or was it even the same guy, Bob Nandor?
I don't know. I'll see if he's
he was Hungarian here, though, the Zaya Nandor, yes.
Carl von Hess versus Eduardo Carpentier. And finally, the dream match of the century. Antonino Rocca, uncrowned champion, versus Ricky Starr, undefeated sensation. Greenwich Village, New York.
Okay, boy, howdy, when you said Danny McShane and Jackie Nichols, I was thinking, is this out in the Olympic Auditorium? Danny McShane was all over everywhere. Jackie Nichols, I seem to associate with California wrestling. The girls' tag, Marva Scott and Babs Wingo, were sisters, as has been talked about with the new Queen of the Ring movie, along with Ethel Johnson. And Lulu Mae Provo and Kathleen Wimbley were, I think, the first two black girls that came along afterwards. And goddamn, since the last one of the sisters didn't debut until 1954, we've got Jerry Graham and Roy Shire as partners against Wilbur Snyder and Chief Bigheart. Snyder, of course, I don't think debuted till 55. He played pro football for the Edmonton Eskimos. Jerry Graham and Shire would have been a team, or at least able to be a team, in the late 50s. Kowalski and Nandor, Von Hess and Carpentier, Rocca and Starr. Is what, are you trying to fool me with a Madison Square Garden card? Or is this, again, is it a Toronto or a Philadelphia? I don't think it's Toronto, even though a lot of these guys were over at in that market. It's either, oh, God damn it. It may not be Madison Square Garden, but it's a major city in the Northeast, and I'm just going to pick a year. It's before Jerry got Eddie, maybe 1958.
Very close. The date, June 10th, 1957. Official program, Griffith Stadium, Washington, D.C., Vince McMahon promoter.
Yeah, it didn't look like a garden card, but that was the time period, and it's just, different matchups than what was drawing the big money, except for Rocca and Starr. They had a couple of matches in the garden, did they not?
I don't know for sure. I'd have to go back and check, but it is interesting. If you go back to the beginning of the century, there were matches in boxing and wrestling called the match of the century.
Yeah.
Here's another one, the dream match of the century.
Here was one we had here in Louisville. Austin Idol versus Jerry Lawler, grudge match of the year. Guess what the date was?
What was the date?
January 4th. It's the first show of the fucking year.
Yeah. But this is the dream match of the century, Rocca versus Starr. It's interesting thinking about that being, the big dream match.
Well, Rocca and Starr, similar in styles, if anybody
High
could
flyers.
be similar to either one of those guys. Well, and now the people get the idea they were jumping off the top rope constantly. They weren't really high flyers as much as the Rocca had the acrobatics, the leapfrogs and the drop kicks and the kicking the guy in the face with his foot and the shoulder ride, whereas Ricky Starr legitimately had the ballet background, and he also was apparently a fairly salty shooter, and combined that to do the spinning and the pirouettes and the leaping and the kicks. And he ended up, for a couple of years in this country, he was one of the biggest box office attractions in the business, and then went and had a long run in Europe and kind of disappeared from the United States in the 60s. But Rocca and Starr, because both of them were so unique and had that, mutual odd style, that was kind of the two guys that were in fans' mind. Oh, we'd like to see this guy against that guy. So they did it.
I got to send you a picture of this. It's a picture of Dr. Jerry Graham. It says, Inside Dope. Dr. Jerry Graham, popular mat star, gives Morris Siegel, the nation's top TV sports commentator, some inside information on wrestling over the Capitol Arena TV network. Do you know too much about the other Morris Siegel, the one who's not a wrestling promoter?
Well, I thought that's the one you were talking about until you just said that. And I was like, what is Morris Siegel doing up there on the Capitol Wrestling TV network?
Yeah, I got to look for that. I thought it was Lance Russell on first sight. We'll see what we can find out. That's the Capitol program. Let's get another one here. This one's not a program. This is a postcard with an attached pass that you can cut off. The two other big bouts that are not listed here, let me just say that. Will Weidner versus Gorilla Ramos. Billy Hansen versus Jumping Jack Claiborne.
Okay.
The Unmasked Golden Terror versus Irish Pat Fraley. And finally, by public demand and edict, the Cougar versus Vincent Lopez resume their feud.
Okay. Will Wheaton, was he in the first match listed?
Will Weidner or Weidner, Weidner.
Yeah, I got no idea. Gorilla Ramos, there was an Apache Bull Ramos, but this is way before his time because of a name in the next match. I don't know who Hansen was, but Jack Claiborne was one of the first African-American male stars, along with the Black Panther Jim Mitchell and Celie Samara. He was of that same generation. So this, to me, and the Unmasked Golden Terror, who the fuck knows? Pat Fraley, again, a name that I've heard from the 40s, and the Cougar, no idea, but Vincent Lopez was not only the top babyface, the top draw in Los Angeles and a lot of Southern California in the 1940s. He had one version of the world title out there. And I think he was probably the top guy right before the television era when Gorgeous George came in, and took over Hollywood wrestling. Would I be crazy to say that this is some kind of suburb of the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles in the Southern California area sometime around the mid 1940s, 1946, let's say?
I mean, it was such a hard one to figure out. You came so close. That was actually excellent. It's at the Olympic.
Okay.
The Olympic Auditorium, Wednesday.
It just didn't seem like a big enough card.
Wednesday, April 11th, 1945.
Oh.
And this, again,
the day before FDR died.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And this pass here, which is, again, a postcard that has a perforated part that you could just rip off. This card entitles you to a 50% discount on ringside and lower floor reserved seats. Present this card at the box office Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday in exchange for your ringside and reserved seats. No phone orders, please. Save and see a great wrestling show. Void after 8 p.m. on day of show. And then it has here, reserve 50%, $1, federal tax 40 cents, state tax 10 cents, total $1.50. Or reserve 50%, 50 cents, federal tax 20 cents, state tax 5 cents, 75 cents. But there it is, the Olympic Auditorium.
Okay.
April.
And that was 1945.
Yes.
And I mentioned Jim Mitchell's, I have his date book. And I've talked about this before that John Cosper found when he found the guy that had bought Jim Mitchell's house. And
yeah.
It was about a year or two later. I'm trying to think whether I can't reach it, 46 or 47, but Jim Mitchell came in and had a main event at the Olympic with Gorgeous George, and it caused a riot. And that was a famous match in Los Angeles history at that point in time. And his records indicate that he got paid $140 for that main event against Gorgeous George. Now, with those prices that you just quoted, if the Olympic Auditorium drew 5,000 people, that was probably a $5,000 or $6,000 house because tickets were around $1 a piece. Gorgeous George would have made $500 because he always got 10% at least, right? Depending on what the after tax was. But point being, when you figure for inflation, because I was doing this for another project, 1946, $1 today, it's almost 20 times. Somewhere around, I think, $17, $18 or whatever. So Jim Mitchell would have got, he got like a $2,500 payoff, but Gorgeous George got almost 10 grand in today's money in those days for a main event at the Olympic Auditorium.
What are your thoughts on the idea of sending out a weekly postcard to your regular customers? Or I guess not your regular. I mean, your regulars probably don't need a discount to come in. They'll be there no matter what.
That's the thing. It was World War II. It wasn't over yet. A lot of the guys were in service. Look at this fucking card. The Unmasked Golden Terror, the Cougar. There's 2 people on the card that even we have ever heard of.
Well, Vincent Lopez was a big star.
Yes, Lopez and Claiborne. But that's the thing, is that Southern California wrestling and a lot of wrestling, anything that didn't involve Wild Bill Longson during World War II was down. For some, that's where he vaulted ahead of everybody, and he was old enough they didn't draft him. And he was drawing mega money in Toronto and St. Louis and Houston and all these different places. But in a lot of other locations, wrestling was down. It wasn't setting the world on fire in Southern California, and there was no wrestling in Madison Square Garden. So they were sending out passes trying to revitalize what was going on out there. And then by the time TV came in and Gorgeous George, then the Olympic was the place to be, and they didn't need to give discounts. But these things come and go.
All right, this next one, we'll see how in your wheelhouse it is. The big thing is for you to guess the year, I guess. The opening bout.
I'm off on the years today for whatever reason.
The opening bout, Les Thornton versus Nick Kiniski. Or Kiniski, excuse me.
Kiniski.
CV Afi, or as it says here, Siva Afi, versus Jake Roberts. Billy Jack Haynes versus Hercules Hernandez. Adorable Adrian Adonis versus Tony Mr. USA Atlas. Corporal Kirshner versus Paul Mr. Wonderful Orndorff. The Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov versus Mike Rotundo and Dan Spivey. A tag title match, 1 fall, 1 hour time limit. Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith, the champions, versus JJ Funk and Haas Funk, the challengers. For another championship, which I won't name, Randy Macho Man Savage, the champion, versus Pedro Morales, the challenger.
Oh my God.
And finally, the main event, 1 fall, 1 hour time limit. King Kong Bundy and Big John Studd versus the Super Machine and the Giant Machine.
And Giant was Andre, was Super. Was that Mulligan or was that Edie?
I think it was Bill Eadie.
Boy, howdy, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 matches. Or if you want to do it this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 20, 24 stars on the card. Did you notice every time you do an old show, Brian, from the 40s or 50s or maybe 60s, there's like 3 matches, 4 matches, 5 matches. And today there's like 9 matches, 10 matches, 11 matches. The formula for paying the boys never changed. You're just cutting, instead of 6 slices of the pie, you've got 24. And that's what happened to money in wrestling. As they had to make the cards bigger, they just didn't increase the fucking percentage of the payoff. But nevertheless, this is obviously the WWF. Nick Kiniski was the son of Gene Kiniski and brother of Kelly Kiniski. He broke in around the time we were in Dallas. We worked with him some in World Class. Jake, everybody knows who all these people are. Can't even really give you any trivia, except Jimmy Jack and Hoss Funk were Jesse Barr and Dory Funk Jr., because Vince didn't like the name Dory, I guess. And when Terry left to care for his sick horse the first time, they brought Jimmy Jack in as the other brother.
Can you imagine that conversation? Listen, I hate Junior. Okay, we don't have to use Junior. No, I hate Dory too.
But Hoss is okay. The Savage match was the Intercontinental title because that's when Pedro was champion, right?
No, it's when Savage was champion.
Was Savage champion then? All right. But nevertheless, the point is, this is the WWF. It doesn't seem like it's the Garden. I don't remember the Machines main eventing the Garden, but anything could have happened. But the year would have to be, for all these people to be there and in those positions, wouldn't it have to be 1986 or late 85?
The day. Go ahead.
I'm saying, I'm just Philadelphia.
Man.
What?
The day, Monday, August 25th, 1986. Madison Square Garden.
Madison Square Garden.
New York, New York.
It.
You talked yourself out of it.
I talked myself out of it. All right. Well, nevertheless.
A lot of matches, though. I mean, that's the thing. You don't see, nowadays it's TV tapings with long promos. Obviously, it's a different animal altogether. But look at how many matches are on this show. And it was televised.
And they were probably all still 5 minutes long.
All right, final program here today. This is going to be a tough one.
Uh-oh.
Event number 1, KO Ken Yates versus Danny Littlebear. The second event, Evil Eye Valentine versus Chief Crazy Horse.
Oh, good Lord.
There will then be an intermission. The third event, Tito Carrion versus Pancho Rosario.
Pancho Rosario also worked at one point in time as either Gypsy Rosario, and I think he may have even tried to be Gypsy Joe.
And that's Bruno Sammartino, isn't it?
That's right. He was Bruno Sammartino.
Then there's Baby Blimp versus Dick Steinborn.
Okay, Baby Blimp is George Harris, George Two-Ton Harris, George Bunk Harris. He wrestled as the Baby Blimp because he was childhood friends with Roy Welch and Buddy Fuller, with Buddy Fuller, and Roy Welch was already an adult. But he was friends with the Fuller and Welch family, and he broke in as a wrestler, and he looked like a littler version of Martin the Blimp Levy. He was like 600 pounds, so he worked as the Baby Blimp and then became a manager, George Two-Ton Harris. But all the boys called him Bunk because of his stories he used to tell. And he ended up being one of the maintenance guys along with Klondike Bill for Crockett Promotions. And briefly, before he finally retired, I think 1990, he worked for TBS. So he went all the way from Outlaws with the fucking Fuller family in the 40s to working for Turner Broadcasting. And who'd he wrestle, Baby Blimp?
Baby Blimp versus Dick Steinborn.
Steinborn, he's back again. Okay.
Ray Gunkel versus Wild Man Weba.
Okay, Ray Gunkel obviously was the husband of Ann Gunkel, and Ray Gunkel was an NCAA champion wrestler that became the top babyface in Georgia and owned part of the promotion. And when he had the heart attack and died, and they tried to split the company, and that's what led to the Georgia Wrestling War. Jim Weba, Skandor Akbar. Oh, Jimmy Weba.
Wild Man Weba.
Wild Man Weba.
The Butcher versus Greg Peterson. There's not a picture here, so I can't help you with if it's Paul Vachon or someone else. Another intermission. And then finally, tag team match, main event of the evening, 2 different sets of titles. I don't know if it's a giveaway or not. What the fuck?
What the fuck?
European champions versus Southern champions. Both titles are at stake. The Infernos, managed by J.C. Dykes, the European champions, versus Enrique and Alberto, the Torres brothers.
Torres brothers.
The Southern champions.
Okay. Well, you said this would be hard. Actually, this one's easier than that other fucking fiasco you gave me. Danny Little Bear. He was just on the card at that point, but Danny Little Bear was big in the central states. This is not there. Kansas City area for a long time, and he did a lot of work in Tennessee in the 70s. He also he lived in Western Kentucky for a while and went to jail for some type of improprieties, I think, when carrying things around he wasn't supposed to have. Tito Carrion was an old-timer, as was Pancho Rosario, the Baby Blimp and Steinborn we talked about, Ray Gunkel and Weba we talked about. Greg Peterson was a babyface in a variety of the Southern territories, especially over in Mobile, Alabama and Southern Alabama. The Butcher, I think, was Paul Vachon rather than Abdullah the Butcher, because we are in Georgia, and it is the late 1960s, I believe, possibly early 70s. I haven't narrowed that down yet. The Infernos were Frankie Kane, and I believe his partner at that time would have been Rocky Smith. J.C. Dykes was their longtime manager. He was from down around Chattanooga, Tennessee, and managed all over the South for a long time. The Infernos, Frankie Kane had the loaded boot, and they also threw fire. And the Torres brothers, which 2 of the 3 were these? This was Alberto and Enrique?
That is correct.
And there were 3 Torres brothers, but again, they were 2 of the biggest baby faces in the Georgia territory in the late 60s and early 70s, as Hispanic talent, but they caught on.
And Enrique had been a major star on the West Coast, whatever, 10 years earlier.
Well, you expect that because California has a Hispanic population, but in those days in Atlanta, that was like, wow. So it is Atlanta, and I bet you it's the City Auditorium, and the only thing I'm looking for is the year, and I'm going to just pluck something out of the fucking air and say 1968.
Oh, man.
Again, you give me that.
Atlanta's wrestling program, The Ringsider, on the cover, Atlanta's favorite son, Ray Gunkel. 25 cents. Friday, July 8th, 1966.
Well, there you go. Goddamn, I'm good on the places. I'm fucking up on the dates this time.
Program subject to change. We reserve the right to change the order of events. The promoter is not responsible if contestant failed to appear in the ring due to conditions beyond our control, such as injuries, illness, accidents, etc. When possible, substitute matches will be made. The law forbids throwing objects into the ring. Do you like to have someone throw things at you? We're sure you don't. That's why we ask you not to throw anything into the ring or at the wrestlers. Throwing objects at a wrestler also is a violation of the city ordinance, and anyone caught is subject to arrest, fine, and imprisonment.
No, that used to be in a ton of programs because we talked about this the other day on one of the shows. People would bean the heels with anything they could get a hold of or get their hands on. That's why they quit selling glass bottles in arenas, but anything that was in a woman's purse or a guy's pocket or what they could pick up or wad up, it was, it was an issue.
On the back cover, we also have an ad. There's lots of ads for local, a motel. There's, at the Atlanta Sports Arena, there's dancing and all.
Was the Varsity advertising back then with the wrestling?
I don't see that. Refrigeration Mechanic by Atlantic Fixture and Sales Company.
The Varsity is the largest fast food place in the state of Georgia. Maybe it's a giant thing, a huge parking lot, drive-in, burgers, dogs, that type of thing.
Well, we have a nice photo here of Fred Blassie. It says, Fred Blassie says, by all means, come and see me at all I screwed it up. By all means, come see me at Al Means for I can't say this. Fred Blassie says, by all means, come see me at Al Means, Ford City, 1665 Scott Boulevard, Decatur, Georgia. Get the Blassie deal on a new 66 Ford car or truck or good used car. No other dealer can beat my deal. They wouldn't dare.
And he was working there.
Yeah.
He was a salesman there. Blassie had kidney issues and had a kidney removed and retired from wrestling for what was it, a year and a half, maybe, that period of time. He was living in Georgia and taking advantage of his celebrity because he had been a huge draw there as a babyface and a heel.